Dean and Tyler Listle are registered investment advisor representatives. Investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, and Secure Retirement Solutions, LLC are not affiliated companies.
It's time for Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. Now, here are your hosts, Dean and Tyler.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Tyler and I will discuss topics that affect your retirement, such as investments, income planning, Social Security, and much more. Good morning, Ty. How are you?
Good morning, Dean. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good, thank you. Today we're going to talk about the year 2020 retirement plan changes. There were some changes that went into place late December of 2019. Some people are aware of the name of some of the changes. It's called the Secure Act, and we'll talk a little bit about what that stands for. And overall, some of the changes are very beneficial for those people looking to retire. However, there's a change in there too that you need to be aware of because it could negatively impact some of your estate planning or those people looking to inherit any of the IRAs you may have at the time of passing. So we'll go through what these 2020 retirement plan changes are and understand that these go into effect right away now in January of 2020. So again, the Secure Act was signed into law in December 2020. Both sides of the aisle agreed to it. And really the first one that most people hear about is changes to the required minimum distribution. And I'll explain just briefly what required minimum distribution is, and then Tyler can talk about the change that's being made to it. A required minimum distribution prior to the year 2020 was the fact that at 70 and a half years old, you were required by the IRS, by the government, to start taking taxes from some of your pre-tax accounts. So what happened, for instance, if you had a traditional IRA, you had to start taking required minimum distributions in a certain percentage, about 3.65% your first year as you go into 70 and a half years old. And then throughout your lifetime, you're required to take that money down. Why? It stimulates tax money going into the economy. So that was law. Now that's changed. So Tyler, let's talk a little bit about the Secure Act and what changed with the required minimum distributions.
Yeah, so with the Secure Act, that stands for Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement, the Secure Act. And that was officially signed into law, Dean, as you had said, on December 20th of 2019. And we think this is an important topic because many of these changes do take place right away in 2020, and now that we're in the new year in 2020 right now, it's important that many people realize and understand a lot of these changes because it does affect many pre-retirees and retirees. And we talked about the Secure Act earlier in 2019, but that was just when a lot of the groundwork and the framework was being laid out for the plan. There was no official laws. Nothing was written into law at the time, but now since it's officially signed into law, we think it's important that we go over that. So first off, with the RMD, the required minimum distribution rule, Dean, as you had mentioned, again, your RMD, we have many clients right now who are taking RMDs, and it's money that you must start withdrawing from any pre-tax retirement accounts, your IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, in the year that you turn 70 and a half years old. So not 70, not 71, but when you turn 70 and a half, you have to start taking that money out. However, that was under the old law. Now, starting in 2020, you don't have to take your RMDs until you turn 72 years old. So that law goes into effect for anyone who turns 70 and a half years old after December 31st of 2019. So right now, if anyone out there is not yet 70 and a half, you don't have to take your required minimum distribution until 72. So keep that in mind. It bumps back from 70 and a half years old to 72. However, if you turn 70 and a half or if you turned 71 last year, then you're not grandfathered into the new rule, or you're not grandfathered in. You have to abide by the old rules and still continue to take it. So keep in mind, anyone who turned 70 and a half after December 31st, 2019. So after right now, you would then, the new rule would apply where you don't have to take the required minimum distribution until 72 years old. And we feel that can be beneficial in extending retirees' pre-tax retirement accounts for those who don't plan on accessing their funds before 72 years old. That means that you don't have to take it as early as before. You can delay it a little bit longer for those people who are planning to work a little bit longer. You can do that, work an extra year and a half to 2 years, since you don't have to take money out until 72. So that does allow for, it's more beneficial for those people that do want to extend their retirement accounts. And again, with the required minimum distribution, I know we touch on it a lot, but it is important that you do take it, because one rule that hasn't changed with it is if you don't take it, you are penalized 50% of what you should have taken. So again, that's one of the biggest penalties that there is. You definitely do want to take it, but the number one rule is the RMDs, you don't have to take your required minimum distribution until 72 now, and that's back from 70 and a half. So keep that in mind.
Okay, good points, Tyler. The next thing we're going to talk about when it comes to some of the retirement plan changes in the year 2020 is you now have the option to get some penalty-free withdrawals for the birth or adoption of a child from your retirement accounts. Now, this sounds good and it does give relief to some of those people. However, you're gonna hear it from both Tyler and I. We think this is a last resort. Part of the reason is, it's wonderful that you're able to spend some of that money to offset some of your expenses at the time of a birth or adoption of a child. But if there are other means to get to that money, it's probably better. Part of the reason is we just see it, we experience this when we meet with people who have to take early withdrawals from 401ks or IRAs. They typically never replenish that money again. Doesn't apply to everybody, but that's a trend we see. So Tyler, let's talk about the specifics on what people are able to withdraw at the time of birth or adoption of a new child.
So starting in 2020, parents can withdraw up to $5,000. So that's the amount, no more than that, but up to $5,000 from a retirement account within a year of a child's birth or adoption without penalty. So you can take money out of your 401k, your traditional IRA, your Roth IRA, any type of retirement account, up to $5,000 without penalty. Now, the change is that in the past, if someone did that, you'd have to pay taxes plus a 10% penalty, a 10% IRS penalty if you're under 59 and a half years old. Now, if you're over 59 and a half in the past, that didn't matter. But there's not too many people that are over 59 and a half that are having kids anyway. So that's something to keep in mind. The new law, it now waives the 10% IRS penalty under 59 and a half, but you still owe taxes on the $5,000. So don't get that confused, where you do still owe taxes if you take money out of your 401k, your IRA, on that $5,000 withdrawal for the birth of a child. However, you don't owe the 10% IRS penalty anymore. So the IRS is now more lenient in that, where what had been happening is there's many people that with the birth of a child, they don't want to see people going into debt. Instead, they will have them take money from their retirement account without penalty. And this law does allow new parents some flexibility when it comes to generating funds after having a newborn or adopting. But like you said, Dean, we really do think it should be viewed as more of a last resort option than something to actually plan for. And reason being is that once you do start withdrawing money in a tax-deferred retirement account, that destroys years of compounding that you can never get back. So with different retirement accounts such as your 401k, your IRA, your Roth IRA, they allow the IRS, they give you contribution limits, meaning once you contribute a certain amount, you can't put any more in. And you can only go and contribute each and every year, where you can't go back and rewind the clock. And let's say if you contributed for 2019, but you didn't put any contribution in for 2018, in 2020, you can't go back and put money in for 2018. You only get a certain time period. So whenever you have retirement accounts that restrict how you can put the money into it, you should really reconsider taking money out, because that's a year that you'll never be able to get back if you take $5,000 out. That right there is almost a full IRA or Roth IRA contribution that if you take the money out, you can't get that back in there. So again, once you start withdrawing that destroys the years of compounding that you can never get back. use this law as a last resort option. And instead, how to get around this where you don't have to take the $5,000 out from a retirement account is make sure that you have a sufficient emergency fund built up within your savings account specifically for circumstances like a new child. Even if it's an unexpected new child, you want to make sure that we always preach having 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in your emergency fund. That way you can take $5,000 out of there and not have to go into debt for it or tap into your retirement funds for it, but have that set aside in savings to begin with. That way you won't have to worry about dipping into a retirement account.
Okay, so we talked about 2 points so far that are going to change in 2020. One is the required minimum distribution age going from 70 and a half to 72. We talked about the penalty-free withdrawals for the birth or adoption of a child. Those are two very favorable situations for people as they save money and look towards retirement. However, there's a change that's coming up here that you have to be aware of, and this is one that we tell people to please be aware of. You need to talk to your financial advisor, your tax advisor when it comes to something like this. Prior to 2020, if you had an IRA, you passed away and it goes on to your beneficiaries have their whole lifetime to be able to take down the required distributions. So it could be stretched over their lifetime. Hence, that's where the name stretch IRAs have come from. So again, whether it's a Roth account or a traditional IRA, prior to 2020, at the time of passing, your beneficiaries have their lifetime to take the required minimum distributions. Therefore, it doesn't hurt them so significantly from a tax standpoint, because if your beneficiaries are working and they have to take money from IRAs, that is a taxable event. So it's going to affect their taxes, especially if those accounts are sizable. Well, now what's going to happen is in the year 2020 and into the future, those IRAs have to be spent down much quicker, meaning there could be significant tax implications to your beneficiaries, tax implications that they might not be ready for. So what we recommend is in the year 2020, use it not only to meet with your financial advisors and tax preparers to talk about your investments and your tax situation. Also talk about some estate planning a little bit here and have a plan in place on what you're going to be doing with those IRAs should you inherit them, or if you're the owner of them, what's going to happen to your children or loved ones who inherit them. So Tyler, let's talk about the specifics of what's going to happen now with stretch IRAs.
Yep, so one of the big retirement plan changes coming up here is the change to people who inherit who inherit an IRA or a 401k. And many of the changes are beneficial, but typically it's all going to balance out. So this is one that for clients, for people that we see, usually this new law won't be as beneficial as the old one. But what had happened, Dean, as you said, is currently anyone who inherits a Roth or traditional IRA, they can stretch it out, the required distributions over their lifetime. So whenever you inherit an IRA, you have a few different options. You can either take the money as a lump sum, which typically is frowned upon because you have to pay taxes on every penny and you can't control that tax burden. And many people don't do that unless they desperately need the funds right away. Or you can stretch it out over 5 years or over your lifetime. Many people will stretch it out over their lifetime where they have to take required distributions over their lifetime, and that is known as a stretch IRA, is what many people call it. So under the new law, anyone who inherits a pre-tax retirement account from someone who dies in 2020 or later would now have to take the money out and pay any taxes due within 10 years of inheriting the account. So again, the big change is in the past, if you inherited it, you would have to take a required distribution. It's a small amount that you'd have to take out every single year, but you could stretch that out over your whole entire lifetime. It could be over 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. Now you have to take all the money out within 10 years of inheriting it. So that's a big change. And however, though, that law does exempt some beneficiaries from the rule, such as surviving spouses are the big one, where they can still inherit an account and treat it as their own and take the distributions based on their own age, which is a good thing. So again, this law does not apply to spouses. The main one that we see it is if you're a child inheriting money from your parents, for example. then it would apply to you. And again, we do view this change in the law as negative for those inheriting accounts, because if you do inherit a sizable IRA or 401k, we see it oftentimes where there's children and they're fortunate enough to be within a wealthy family and they might inherit $1 million, then they're going to get hit very hard tax-wise if the account has to be emptied within 10 years. And you then lose that freedom and flexibility to stretch out the tax burden over your lifetime, especially if you don't need the money. And the other thing is, usually when children are inheriting money, they are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They're in their highest earning years, so they're already making a lot of money through their job. They probably don't need this inheritance right now, so it is beneficial for them to stretch it out over their lifetime. However, now they have to take it within a time span of only 10 years, only 1 decade. So it is negative for those who are inheriting money, especially a sizable amount from an IRA or a 401k. But in addition to that, it also makes proper estate planning that much more important for those who have large pre-tax retirement accounts, because their beneficiaries, they'll be inheriting that money and having to withdraw it within 10 years. So if that's the case for you, and you might have children who are inheriting this, you want to make sure that your estate plan is set up properly. And that could mean additional trust planning, because with a trust, it spells out how money is received. So if you have certain children who are going to receive money and they might have, unfortunately, an addiction or a problem where they're going to spend it right away, well, then you might want to go and get a trust and specify how a certain child can spend money if you know that they're going to have it and they're going to have to spend it within 10 years. In addition to that, that could mean different amendments that are put in your will or trust or estate planning documents, and or it could mean spending down more money sooner, because if you know that you're going to, you have a sizable amount and your children are going to inherit it and they have to spend it within 10 years, and if they might not even need it, well, then that might force you, if you're retired right now, to focus on spending it down even more so. So a number of different estate planning tools have to also be used here. But again, just to summarize, because this is a big one, when you inherit an IRA